Ready to go, Andy? You're on mute.
Call the meeting in order. If we can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag
United States of America,
and to the
the
republic
republic
for which
which it
it
stands,
one
nation,
nation, under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and
and
justice
justice for
for
all.
all.
Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Maglio. Trustee Berkshire.
Here.
Trustee Domke.
Here.
Trustee Pileski.
Here.
Trustee Sarno.
here,
Trustee Trejo.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. I have a motion to accept this evening's presentation of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call?
Trustee Domke.
Aye.
Trustee Trejo.
Aye.
Trustee Sarno.
aye,
Trustee Berkshire.
Yes.
Trustee Pileski.
Aye.
And the motion is carried. Okay, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the village board meeting is being virtually and will be streamed on the village's web channel. Public comments. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments this evening?
Yes, we do. We have one that was submitted prior to the meeting. This public comment is topic is a concern about yard waste burning. And the resident states, we would like to comment on the restrictions the village places on burning leaves and brush. It is our understanding that there is a village ordinance against such behavior. The reasons would seem to be obvious. Burning leaves and brush is harmful to the environment and is a nuisance to neighbors who are forced to contend with the smoke and the smell. Despite the ordinance, we are forced to deal with such burning frequently on the weekends in the spring and fall, and on many summer weekends as well. These are not recreational bonfires. These fires start early in the day on Saturdays and Sundays and create a smoky, stinky haze over the entire neighborhood all day. We reside 1 block from the fire station and police station, where the smoke is quite visible, and yet there seems to be no effort to curb this behavior. On the one instance where we called the non-emergency police number and asked that they send someone to deal with a particular neighbor, but asked that we not be identified, imagine our surprise when a fire truck pulled into our driveway and 6 fully uniformed fire personnel came up our driveway looking for the fire. This is a waste of fire personnel resources and does nothing to curb the burning. Perhaps someone can explain to us why the village maintains a zero tolerance policy and ticketing of garbage cans visible from the street and parking over a sidewalk, but appears to take no action whatsoever to deter residents from this burning. Why should we continue buying waste stickers if there is no enforcement? It would be like the village making vehicle stickers voluntary. Either it's mandatory or it's not. Please take some action to address this issue. That's all I have.
Mark, do you have any comment to make on that, or what happens in those instances? Are we going out? We're not.
Yeah, so traditionally what will happen is that depending on how the call is classified by DUCOM or dispatch agency, either the police or the fire department will be dispatched. I took a look back at our incidents. Since October 1st, we've been dispatched to 9 open burning or unauthorized burning complaints that we responded to. At that point, what we'll do is we'll go out, we'll investigate the situation. And if it's outside the code, then we ask the resident to put the fire out. Basically, the first time explaining, doing some education with the resident of the ordinance. If we come back to that address or again, then usually we'll ask for officer assistance to issue a citation. Of the 9 addresses we've gone to since October, none of them's been a repeat. I know this Police Chief Herron's done some research on that too. He had sent something over, and last year, towards the end of the year, there was 1 citation issued, which resulted in a $100 fine. And there's been 2 citations issued this year for unauthorized burning, which were both warnings. So my recommendation is if a resident does have a open burning complaint is to call our DUCOM number, either the non-emergency DUCOM number or 911. It gets it into the system, and then the dispatcher can go through that procedure, determine if it's a police issue or a fire issue, and then dispatch the appropriate authority. And the reason I recommend calling the 9119 is not all the time that if somebody, especially on the weekend, there's not always somebody in the house at the fire station. And then obviously similar issues sometimes at the police station if all the officers are busy running calls or handling other situations.
Okay, it sounded like this was a repeated offender, and I was just wondering why there wasn't a citation written on the second time out. Well, we'll have to look at it.
Yeah, all I can say is that looking at our records, we don't have any repeat address violations, and when I compared it against the police, I didn't see anything. So that's where it's really important for the residents to make that call for us so we can start that history and tracking those calls to those particular addresses. But yes, I have to agree it is a nuisance, especially in the fall with the leaves. And while we don't actively go out on patrol for it, if our guys will see something, they will stop. And obviously a lot of it depends how it comes to us from DUCOM of how we respond.
Chief Herron, you have anything to add to that?
No, Mark is absolutely correct. I just checked our logs too. I have really since October, I've had it October 28th, November 8th, 2 different calls. Neither one of them are repeats from the previous year. I pulled since May of 2019, which we have 11 open burnings. But as the fire chief says, it's either a response from DUCOM, whether police are dispatched or fire. Rarely are we both dispatched. It's typically one or the other, but according to my records, I've had no repeats. And the last warning was issued on October 28th. So I'm assuming that was to a Summerdale Lane address that was issued.
All right, thank you. And then Jeff, then maybe we'll get back to this resident, letting them know the findings that we had here in case they weren't watching, so we can attend to their matter.
Yes, we will.
Anything else, Patty? That was it, okay. Let's move on to officials and staff report. I'm up first. I'd like to call for a motion to adopt a resolution extending the declaration of local state emergency approved by the village board on October 12th of 2020.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Sarno.
Aye.
Our motion is carried. Okay, moving right along. Any trustees that have anything to report this evening? Mr. Domke.
Well, I'd like to say that it was an honor for Bruce and I to show up at Virgin Wellness Center that just opened in Roselle, cutting the ribbon on Saturday. This is a family that already has a business in Roselle and as a plumbing business. And she is also a licensed practitioner of wellness and has brought many clients that she had from another business. And they also had invested quite heavily in their business. It was well set up and very contemporary. And It will be a wonderful Christmas present to my wife. Uh, My wife has already asked for that, so we'll have to get her a package. I don't know if Bruce has a comment or,
Other than they were, very receptive. We suggested that they look into the Chamber of Commerce. We also suggested that they reach out to you, Patty, just to kind of, I don't know what we're doing when we do our, our new business welcomings, and suggest, especially with the virtual, but told them to get a hold of you to figure out, what we can do, and then what other packets we can do. And hopefully the pictures that Wayne has will make it to our newsletter. And I told them that, we just welcome in, and they're looking forward to being part of the village.
Well, thank you both for representing the village on that. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Village clerk,
No report.
village attorney,
No report.
village administrator,
No report.
Chamber of Commerce liaison.
well, Andy, I do have a couple of things. Number one is the things that we discussed, the initiatives that might be between the village and the chamber will be discussed at some time at a chamber meeting, so I'm not at liberty to bring them out in the meeting right now. So all I can really comment on about the chamber is another one of their dinners. That's going to be on Tuesday, November 17th at 5:30 at Villaggio's Ristorante on 1242 West Lake Street. So assuming that everybody can get in and do that with this new tier 2. I haven't seen where we couldn't, but I don't know how that'll work out, Andy. But
And
that's planned. It's still on the planning list.
as far as, and I'm sorry to do this, Wayne, but I had talked to Mr. Dombrowski today, and that dinner will probably be canceled.
Oh, okay.
It was sent out. I got an email from the chamber this afternoon stating that it was canceled.
Okay.
I didn't see that.
They could
All right,
do.
well, then I have nothing to say.
Well, thank you for your nothing comment.
Hey, Andy, I wanted to show this to everybody, because you weren't on the list yet. Here, I shrunk the scissors.
Oh, no. This
I'm
has been
sorry.
around for a long time, Wayne.
Probably cut better too.
Probably will. Moving on to our consent agenda, all items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial in nature, and will be enacted in one motion. There will be no discussion on those items. If I can have our village attorney give us a summary of the consent agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the consent agenda tonight, we have presentation and approval of the village board minutes of October 26th, 2020, the release of previously approved executive session minutes of February 22nd and April 25th of 2016, and May 14th and July 23rd of 2018. The approval of a partial payment for the Botterman Ditch Aerator Replacement Project in the amount of $47,700. The adoption of an ordinance establishing a pay plan for village officers and employees. The adoption of a resolution approving an amendment to an IGA and subrecipient agreement for the coronavirus relief funds with Cook County. And finally, the approval and authorization of a reduction in a public improvement security construction bond in the amount of $23,433, and the release of 2 security bonds in the amount of $10,000 each for 2 privately owned low flow pressure pumped sanitary systems for the NMJ subdivision. That's all.
Thank you. I need a motion to accept this evening's consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right, Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire.
Yes.
Our consent agenda is approved. Moving on to the regular agenda on the community development. Trustee Poleski, we have nothing. Under administration, trustee Sarno, we have nothing. Under fire, I'll call for a motion to authorize the purchase of a Zoom decontamination system from Micro USA for the cost not to exceed $6,617.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
Trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
Our motion is carried. We have nothing under police with trustee Domke, nothing under public works with trustee Berkshire. Under finance, trustee Trejo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve the accounts payable list for November 9th, 2020 in the amount of $1,166,323.68.
I'll need a second, please.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the bills list? Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call?
trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Poleski,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Abstain.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Sarno,
Aye.
And our motion is carried.
And then I'd like to open up a discussion to review and discuss the FY 2021 proposed budget.
Jeff, I assume you were going to take it from there? Sorry, do I need a second on?
I'll second it.
Okay, and do I need a roll call?
it's for discussion. I don't think we do.
No, we don't.
Jim, or did Jim go? No, okay. All righty. Jeff,
Mr. Mayor, if I just may make a couple of comments before you get started. First of all, I want to thank trustees to meeting with us individually, the Finance Planning Committee last week. Certainly your questions helped us kind of position our presentation for tonight. But first, kind of fiscal year 2020, we've all lived it. There were several factors influencing our budget planning. Number one was obviously the pandemic and the challenges we faced as an organization we haven't seen since the Great Recession in 2008 or 2009. But I think the prudent budgeting measures and policies taken by the village board of the past and this particular village board have allowed us to withstand many of these challenges and put us in a better position to face the uncertainties of 2021. Specifically, back in April, staff put forward a COVID-19 budget response plan, and the board took 3 specific actions then, which really helped us close out this year. Number one was we deferred and eliminated certain operational, capital, and equipment purchases. Number two, we implemented a hiring freeze on all of our vacant positions. Since then, we've brought a couple back. Third, we took advantage of federal stimulus funding through the CARES Act, distribution through our DuPage and Cook counties to reimburse the village for many of our reimbursable COVID-related expenses. And finally, our intergovernmental cooperation showed well. Our membership fees for DUCOM, membership fees for our DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference, and MGP, our GIS consortium, were reduced. So we experienced about $150,000 reduction in our annual fees as members through our intergovernmental cooperation. So I think at the end of the day, when you look at where fiscal year 2020 stands, we obviously ended up with a budget surplus, but we positioned ourselves going into 2021. As we move forward to 2021, the most important thing I want to state is there is no new resident or business owner increases to fines, fees, licenses, or taxes. More important, for the second year in a row, we are not going to implement or recommend any increases to our water, sewer, or CIS fees. Number two, we've kind of reintroduced our capital project programming, which was eliminated in 2020. So I think you'll see when we get to those particular sections of the budget that we've increased our street improvement program, we've done our water main program, and we've done other municipal building and stormwater programs that were deferred or eliminated in 2020. And finally, we rebudgeted our equipment purchases for public safety emergency vehicles and other extrication equipment in the fire department that were eliminated in 2020 also. I think as we move forward with your discussion, Mayor, and going through the budget, one thing I realized in my discussions with the board is the board was feeling good that through the measures we've taken this past year, we positioned ourselves to mitigate some of the challenges we face in moving into next year. That said, I think the uncertainty of the pandemic, the uncertainty of our economy, both national, state, and local, and I also think with the state of Illinois budget process and some of the things that have happened there, this board wisely is continuing to be concerned on our spending planning for 2021. I think as a staff, we put this budget together to reflect what we feel provides those services to the community in 2021, but we fully recognize the uncertainty of 2021. And I would offer up to this board, after we review the budget, that if the board directs staff, we could come back with a similar plan that we did in April with our COVID budget response plan to slow down or defer certain items until at a time this year when the board is more comfortable. And that could be where the pandemic subsides, the economy is in a better position, or we know more from the state of Illinois. So Mr. Mayor, I wanted to make those opening comments for you. Other than that, our staff is here and ready to proceed.
Okay. And let's start the 2021 budget review. I think I will do this, the way I want to do this is I hope everybody's reviewed the budget as thoroughly as they possibly could. So what I would like to do is go over the budget overview, general fund review revenues. If we have any questions for Tom on pages anywhere between 12 and 40, is there anybody that has looked at that would like to address anything on that?
Andy, is the board comfortable with just staff ready to answer the questions?
He's muted.
Andy, you're muted.
Still muted.
I have my mouse on my desk and I'm trying to do the wrong one with the wrong one. Oh my God.
I just want to make sure.
Old guys, what can I tell you? What I would like to do is I would like to know if we would be comfortable of just looking at the sections. If we go over the budget overview and general fund revenues, if we would ask, if we review the pages from 12 to 40, does anybody have any questions to ask Tom on that? Would we be comfortable doing it that way?
And I think the answer is yes. I think Jeff's question was there anything prior to that we had any kind of questions before we jumped into that suggestion that you've made? I can say on my end, I do not have anything. I don't know if any of the other trustees have anything from or prior to page 12.
Anybody?
It's pretty well defined, mostly fixed costs. So I don't have any questions.
Okay, David?
You're muted too, David.
You're muted too, Dave.
I'm just ready for 12 through 40. So whenever we're ready for that piece.
All righty then. Lee?
Nothing before page 12. I'm good.
All right, let's move on to page the overview between 12 and
Andy, there's a lot of feedback I'm getting. I don't know if everyone else is.
Yes, you're not clear, Andy.
I'm sorry?
I'm getting a lot of feedback when you're talking.
Okay, and let me see if I can move this away from the other computer. How's that? Better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Then let's move on between 12 and 40. If anybody has any questions to ask from Tom, please. David.
So overall, I think it looks really good to me. The only thing that really stood out to me, and I was just curious about your thoughts, specifically on the sales tax piece, it looks a little bit more aggressive than I would anticipate, I guess. It's still lower than our 2019, but still higher than what we've seen or what we're projecting for this year. Just kind of curious if you could just share a little bit more about what were some of the assumptions you took into place to kind of come up with that figure.
Sure. So a lot of that is basically what we're seeing coming in through today. A lot of our major sales tax producers are still producing. They're still doing well. As well, much better than I expected, especially this late into the pandemic. And actually through the summer, it was quite surprising, especially for our bigger ones, like our car dealerships and some of the other things. And just plugging the numbers in and seeing, you know, yes, it's higher than you would think, but it's still, as you mentioned, below, you know, what we were received in 2019. You know, this latest surge could have us rethinking those numbers, but overall, and the other part of this too is the uncertainty with the local use tax. Starting January 1, the state is redoing the formula for online sales, moving that away from the local use and into sales tax. So we've got a double whammy of things going on. I don't know how that formula is going to affect us, because a lot of it has to do with where the goods are, where you purchase them, where they're delivered, I'm sorry. So if a lot of people in Roselle shop online, we're going to see an increase in sales tax from that. Previously, local use tax was done on a per capita basis. Now it's going to be done on a where it's delivered to basis. So, you know, we're a little uncertain on that. I could be low, and I probably am. Again, you know, the sales tax is not as high as you see on the chart that's on the screen. 2019, we received 3.3 million, and I'm projecting 3.2 for 2021. So it's always a tough call with sales tax, but I have been using the numbers that we've received to date. And as you know, back in April, March and April, when this whole thing started, I was figuring, I think 20 to 25% reduction, if not more, in sales tax, and that hasn't arrived. So all those things kind of blended in my thoughts of where we're going to be next year.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I really appreciate that. I think it'll be really interesting next year, to your point, once that formula goes into effect, what we actually see received, and that would be interesting to track in our monthly kind of reports.
Yep. Anybody else have a question for Tom? Showing no.
Andy, you're still very scratchy. It's
Really?
tough to hear you.
I don't know why, Jeff. Let me try putting a headset on, see if it clears it up. I know there's some other interference in the background here, and I don't know what it is.
You're clear now.
Yeah, you're clear
now.
now.
Okay.
Don't move. Just stay right there.
All right. I don't
See, you move. Now you're not clear again.
I hear it at my end too. It's chatter. So I don't know if it's myself or what. Am I clear now?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to administration in the general village. Jason, you want to take that? Or has anybody got any questions for Jason there? Showing none. Okay, community development. Pages 51 to 55.
51.
55.
Oh, actually, I had a question, but let me see where it's on page 32. I just wanted to ask about the building permit. So I know a while back, at first we thought we were outpacing the budget amount, which was 250 grand, because a lot of building permit activity. It looks now that we're at 175 for the FY20 estimate, and now we're going back up to 250. So I know at one point we were talking about potentially bringing that down for next year because we were over indexing. But given how much we're under indexing now, is it still reasonable to have that $250,000 assumption for FY21?
Yeah, you know, a lot of those, you know, we were outpacing, and we have been outpacing the number of permits. The problem this year, or the difference this year, is that we don't have a lot of the large permits that we normally see. But I do know that we're getting some. I just saw that there's a tear down and a new home permit that was just that just came in. So those are ones that, you know, we haven't really been seeing. We've been getting the small ones, all the $75 permits, a lot of those. And as I'm talking, I'm just trying to see if I can get my report to see where we're at to date. You know, a lot of that comes from, you know, it was higher last year, mainly due to the apartment buildings that went on East Irving Park, and then some of the other, there was a couple of other larger projects. So I think, you know, when we talk about those, it's anticipating those larger ones and plugging those in. And I still think 250 is a reasonable number just to always plug in because every year is a little bit different.
Andy, if I may.
I get that, but we're pacing 30% under, so.
Yeah, let me see where we're at too.
Jeff, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, as I told trustees in our individual meetings, that's not reflecting anything happening with Metro 19. So obviously that's a proposed project and no redevelopment agreement has been agreed upon yet, but clearly both parties are moving forward. And I would envision building permit line item going up a great deal if that project is approved.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Anybody else? And we'll move on to finance.
What page, Andy?
I'm sorry. 56 through 64.
56.
Andy, if I may, we skipped over 50. We went back to 30, so I wasn't sure if we had any questions on that. We jumped over community. We went back to
Administration.
we went back to fees, but
Andy, if I may.
Please.
Just really quickly, obviously, one of the things I didn't mention in my opening comments, which could have an impact depending on the pandemic, but if you were to turn to page 50, you'd see under administration special events. We are reflecting all of our special events coming back in 2021. I don't think anybody has an idea of if they're going to or not, but clearly that could be one of those areas that we address as we move through the budget process.
thank you, Jeff, because that's why I wanted us to go back to page 50 because I was going to ask that exact question.
So it is budgeted, assuming that we're going to, but clearly much like 2021, we may not. So we just wanted to show it as being budgeted though.
Quick question for Jeff. In light of that too, I'm just thinking at the end of this, I agree we want to budget for it, but I wonder for the sake of making it more accessible and easy to understand on the back end, I know there's going to be some items we might want to list as deferrals. Can we also like group these special events as a category of expenditures so we can see at the end of the day, like this is a group of things that may or may not actually happen this year. So when we're looking at the final numbers, we kind of understand what's our flex numbers, if that makes sense. Like,
Yes.
Because of the uncertainty, especially this year, I think I'd rather be a bit more aggressive about just calling those things out to make it a little bit easier.
That's a great idea. We can kind of, for our next meeting, we can have that kind of opportunities too.
Thank you.
And that'd be great idea again, David, because that'll also reflect how our negative 328 may adjust.
I got a question, if I may.
Please go ahead, Wayne.
You think we'll ever get rid of the newsletter expense and then just do it online and like an e-news and things like that? I mean, you just did this budget paper that's 225 pages and you didn't have to print anything out. So do you think that that day is coming when we can get
Jason,
rid of
would you
the
like to
newsletter?
answer that?
Pardon?
I was going to ask Jason to answer your question.
That's certainly a policy decision of the board, whether or not you want to go to a completely paperless newsletter. Nowadays it's not out of the realm of possibility that that could happen. Staff's kind of been kicking around the idea of what's the most effective and cost effective kind of way of providing village news. And certainly the most timely news is delivered electronically. With the pandemic and stuff, the paper one has not been as robust, hasn't been as big of a newsletter because so many less community events are occurring and our partners aren't kind of submitting any information. So it is a policy decision if the board wants staff to propose that or come up with some alternative ways of delivering the news. Certainly we can do that.
Well, we're all being forced to use more up-to-date ways of communicating, even us seniors.
Right.
So I guess, Jason, the question I would have is we wouldn't know one way or the other. If we get rid of it, we may have people having issues or concerns they may not voice or may not have a way of voicing. And if we keep it, we won't know. So is there a way to which to kind of maybe get some sense of the validity of maintaining it before we just make that policy decision?
We've included questions in the board's previous community surveys, kind of to gauge the overall impactfulness of the different ways that people get news from the village. We can certainly look at maybe a more just kind of tailored means to just elicit responses again from the community before any sort of decisions are made. A couple quick survey questions or something like that, use this coming year and kind of gather that information and look at some other metrics and kind of come back to the board.
That'd be great. And then also pull the, like we said, we stopped some of the business insights or content because of the pandemic and the like. It might be worthwhile to continue to ask them as well as whether or not if we were to eliminate it, would they see a concern?
I guess I should raise my hand, huh? I still believe we have a lot of seniors that aren't tied into a network somewhere. So, and Bruce, like you said, how do you make that call? I would just hate to eliminate the ones that do depend on the paper end of it. I mean, that would be my only fear because some of that is the only communication they get. So I would like just
more
like
insights.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, can I jump in?
Please. I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
No problem. So first, as it relates to the newsletter, I think one potential, I generally agree with Andy that, I don't support necessarily getting rid of it. I do think it would be good to know how many people subscribe to e-news. Because if there's, 8,000 units and only 500 people are subscribing, well, then I think it's pretty obvious that we definitely need to do the publication. If it's pretty much 100% on e-news, then there's probably evidence that we don't need to. I do like David's idea of doing a flex list on a lot of this stuff. As I was saying earlier in the budget meetings with Jeff and Jason, that I definitely have the concern with having the shortfall of the 328,000 that we're budgeting for. So it'd be nice to understand some, maybe have a one pager on even Tom's assumptions on sales tax. I know we just got a little overview of it, but it would be good to see it on paper, just like a one pager of the flex assumptions that we might have. If we believe that, coronavirus goes to this day or that day, what impact do we believe it has on the assumptions, including the permits, right? Because we say there's upside to the permits. And then obviously the special events. And then, like I was saying during the budget overview, just kind of a flex list of the potential deferrals that we could look at mid-year budget review.
Yeah, my only fear is I want to be mindful of how far this would set us back and what it's going to take to recover to where we're going or where we have to be. So,
Andy, I think we can prepare as looking for with kind of all that in mind.
all right. Okay. And we were on finance from 56 to 64. Is there any other questions in there? Okay, let's move on to the fire department between 65 and 74. Does anybody have any questions there? Okay. Let Mark off easy, huh?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, let's move on to the police department between 75 and 83. Nobody wants to pick on the police department either? David?
So I'm just curious now, when it comes to our vehicles, do we have any like, do we catalog all the vehicles we've had in the past and their mileage and other things that have happened? I'm just, as we're looking at replacements and whatnot and trying to get more bang for our buck, I'm just curious, what kind of track record do we have in history to help us make a decision?
Well, excuse me, that is something I know that Tim Thompson has been working on, of trying to collect some of that historical data. In the past, we have kind of identified that a car that turns about 100,000 miles is one that we start losing a return on investment for. If we replace an engine, seats, interiors, relabel the car, we wind up losing that ROI. One of the other things I did is I've been in contact with Ford Motor Company, which has always been difficult with our supplier. And now with the 2020, 2021s, they're giving me what I think is some estimated build dates. They kind of identified if we were to order today, they wouldn't even consider our order until January, and then anywhere between 3 and 4 months for delivery. If we order past January 1st, they have no idea what they're going to wind up doing. But to your answer, or to your question, in the past, we've looked at about 100,000 miles is when we start, is when we replace the cars. Currently in the fleet, I have 2 over 100,000 that are up for replacement, and one that's at 92,000. So I'm getting up there in mileage on many of the cars. And then after that, I'm about 90,000 on a couple of them.
Okay.
So
and
3 cars in the 90s to 100, and then 2 in the very high 80s.
And taking out special events, how many cars do we typically have active at a time during a shift? Like 3 or 4? Is that a safe assumption?
No, we estimate 6 per shift.
Okay.
And then the 2 SRO cars. So 8 is our kind of the general number that we use. Of that, then we kind of expect that 1 or 2 are down. Pretty much 1 is down at least once or twice a week for maintenance, routine maintenance. Each of the cars are maintained on average about once a month. And those are estimates that we look at. That's for your fleet service, your oil change, tire rotation, brakes, etc. And then we also always have to kind of estimate that car that just breaks down. Mechanics have been doing a good job on it, and I'm going to knock on wood because we haven't had a crash lately. But then when a car goes down for a crash, then that's down for several months then at that point, depending on the severity of the crash.
Gotcha. No, I really appreciate that. I feel like when it comes to assets in particular, I'm a bit more sheepish about things this upcoming year. And so, I mean, I would prefer to hold on 2, if not all 3, until mid-year budget, just to give us some extra opportunity, just personal opinion.
And last year we did exactly the same thing. I would have to talk to Karen with Tim over in Public Works and the hiring of the new mechanics. We would have to see what her expectations are of the cars as well. The cars that are out there now with that 100,000 mile range may need new seats. The seats do break down after a period of time. That may be 500 to 1,000 per car, and that may be worth an investment depending on what the engine drivetrain is on those cars.
Like the physical seat they sit in? Sorry, I don't mean to monopolize the time.
The driver's seat, you know, when they sit in it with all their gear, it tends to turn the backs of it up.
Got it. Okay. I've done that to mine a couple times. Thank you.
But if you add a gut belt onto it with everything else on it, it tears the fabric pretty quickly on it.
Bruce, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just had some couple of questions as I was looking through this. In memory, I want to remember that for the Lake Park Liaison program that we have, that's under contract. And so from that, if I remember, regardless of whether we're there or not, we're still getting some revenue from that, correct?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the other, I was interested when I kind of flipping through it. Are concerned with anything with our VIPs with respect to this whole Corona thing? And if that's the case, do we have to look at maybe some augmentation? And similarly, what's going on with the Explorer program with all of this craziness going on?
So we have, we just had an Explorer meeting last Monday. We hold those in the Sallyport with doors open only, limited to, I'm keeping it under 10 people per prior. And so we're still doing the Explorers. We're doing training. We aren't doing any operations with them. Our VIPs is pretty much the same, although we are using them for some operations, but limited it to 2, only 1 per vehicle. And that's really only, we only have 1 car for them. So if we get a bad crash, if fire needs them and EMA can't manage, or needs assistance in managing, we wind up assisting EMA, or they'll help us with traffic control. But the use of the VIPs and Explorers are limited to in person. We're doing training. And then earlier this year, we held a kind of an impromptu luncheon with them, a boxed lunch, just to kind of get them updated to what's going on and making sure that they still felt part of the organization.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I was just going to ask Chief about that, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you, Lee?
It's all right. Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
Were that body cameras activated by the removal of the weapon from the holster? Is there any device that would do that where the officer doesn't have to turn on his camera, but it would happen automatically other than that? Is that?
So the only product that we're aware of for the weapon draw is the mechanical piece that attaches to the holster. The only company that we're aware of that does it, and that's based on review of several other products that are out there, is Axon. And Axon does that for 1 time per holster at $100 per holster. So that's the only device that we're aware of. And the only product line that we know that carries it is the Axon product.
So the only way the cameras get activated right now is if the officer activates it before an event.
So they're activated several ways. They're activated by activation of the overhead lights. So we activate it in a certain position in the siren unit. We'll activate it. We have a sensor, a proximity sensor. So in the event another car is activated or another body cam is activated, the officer walks into that range, which is about 100 meters, about 30 feet. Then your system will activate also.
That's good. That's good. That's
right.
Good. Thank you.
All right, Lee.
All right, thank you. So sorry, I want to revert back to the fire department just real quick. There's too many questions for Heron, so I need to ask Bozic some. No, I just on the window replacement and limestone coping, that's all that stuff. Like I said, to me, that's just still part of the flex list. I just want to reiterate that. And then potentially, I just want you guys to like take a look at it and see if that's something that could wait till mid-year. For the police department, I think, the Axon thing sounds nice. When you draw your weapon, the camera turns on. It sounds like we have other ways that it's turning on automatically. So again, that's another thing I think that we should look at holding off until mid-year when we see how the finances are coming in. Same with the potentially the vehicles. I like the review of the vehicles. Kind of like David was saying, there's a lot of unknowns now. We have the coronavirus spiking up significantly again. There's announced that there was a vaccine, but that's not coming out anytime soon. So I think we should really, I get it. You're saying that you need this, but the reality is does it make sense to buy it right now or not? Or is it better to look at mid-year?
Hey, Wayne.
Sorry, but Lee reminded me that I can go back to the fire department for a minute. And I did find my note on it, so I have to ask this. So in the proposal, there's a $750,000 unit that you mentioned lasts for 20 years, and you have a unit right now that's 17 years old. Why wouldn't I ask the question of why not keep it for 2 or 3 more years before you buy a new one?
So the current one is a 2002 that was tagged as a 2003. So a couple of issues is the first one is that once we do purchase the engine, we're looking at a 9 to 14 month delivery time. So even if we do order it in fiscal year 2020, we won't see that come to us in fiscal year 2021. The second issue is that particular vehicle. One of the, as we talked about, the return on the investment is that the frame rails are delaminating, which means they're rusting out and then they're separating. If we wait 3 or 4 years on that, and that rust continues, because there's really no way to reduce the progress of that without expensive repairs and taking the whole body off and repairing that, is that if we wait to 3 or 4 years, then we run into a potential of not having any value and just except for a scrap value. Right now, if we get rid of that particular engine, I would suspect we'll see a $30,000 to $40,000 that will get on the trade, and that was roughly what we got for the last one. If it becomes to a point where the frame rusts and becomes unable to sell, then we'll get the scrap value, which would be about $1,000. So, and then obviously the third part of that is just the reliability factor of it. Is as we get into the older engines, the liability factor becomes a concern, and obviously technology. There's been a lot of technological advances in 17 years of a fire engine, both from a operational efficiency standpoint, environmental standpoint, and then most concerning to me is safety standpoint for our guys when it comes to restraint systems and the safety and ergonomics that are built into the new vehicles that weren't there 17 years ago.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Andy, I'm going to venture down this road, so forgive me. And I started out my presentation talking about what the board is really asking us to do, whether that's some flex items, deferring, and forgive me here, but I think it's very easy for us to commingle funds. We have, for our capital projects, we have funding sources that are different than our general operation funds. And I have no problem deferring or eliminating or putting a program together for the board to consider in a couple of weeks. But does it matter to the board that whether it's a general fund item, equipment replacement fund item, a capital projects fund item, which are funded differently, and albeit if we run into a jam somewhere, we can certainly reallocate those revenues to help a fund that's more in need. But all of our funds are doing fairly well. And I just want the board to consider, and maybe you have already, that these items are across different funds. They're funded differently with different revenue sources. And that could fall into that flex discussion or that defer discussion. Does that make any sense to our trustees?
Lee?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's part, I agree with you. That should be part of the flex list. So we could say, okay, what is, equipment replacement? What is, basically like even if a color coding, like, hey, this is a potential at risk, or this is at risk if we wait, right? Like we could have a timeline column. We can have, in terms of, hey, we need to order this by this date or we're not getting it, right? If it's a fire truck and we don't order it by February, well, we're not going to be able to order it for another year because they only make these things once a year, whatever that is. And then the funding source, to your point, and is it, red, yellow, green, in terms of how confident we are that we're going to be able to have the money to pay within budget. I think all that stuff makes sense to have. And then the only other comment I'll make, I know that just going back to the police and the camera activation and the when weapons unholstered, I do want to just make the point too for the public so that they know that Roselle is a leader in body cam usage. So definitely a credit to Chief Herron. I believe we're one of only 2 municipalities that have body cameras in DuPage County. So I just want to definitely call that out for any residents watching, that we are a leader in this space.
Bruce?
So actually I wanted to thank Jeff for bringing that suggestion, because I was going to look at something, how can we get around the constant talk of what can we defer? Because I mean, it's going to come up in the next section when we look at the vehicles under public works, right? We deferred them once. How bad are they? We allowed for them to go. Are we at a point where we can't defer them? All of those questions could be probably summarized in a way so we can look at and figure out which boxes do we need to check, which boxes we don't have options to even check. And then, as Jeff pointed, maybe we can figure out, well, what options do we have? Do we take money from X to put it to Y? Whatever we can do to help those situations where we don't have the options. So I think that will help us along the way, because I think we'll just have the same kind of conversations as we continue down this budget.
Thank you.
And, just to remind everybody, a municipality vehicle is not like a privately owned vehicle. And trust me, I don't want to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on vehicles myself. But the vehicles, I know the fire department has hours on them. Police department does not have hours on their vehicles. An hour meter is what I'm talking about. So 100,000 miles on a squad car could be like 200,000 miles on your personal car, because it's running a fair good amount of time to support the systems that are in it. So I just want to make sure that people understand that, just because there's a 100,000 mile marker on it, that is not determining it, because cars nowadays last 200,000. So
Thank you for that direction, trustees.
anybody else under fire or police again? Okay, we want to move on to public works department from 84 through 99.
I mean, again, it's pretty much the same comments like we're saying. The only thing I would say is, even if something's getting funded, for example, obviously we want to do the reforestation as quick as possible, but it's 30 grand. So if we sort of take that 30 grand out and allocate it to something else that's more urgent, that's the kind of thing that would be good to see. Like I said, as we're developing that flex list. I mean, I think everything in here makes sense at some point, but again, at some point, a decision needs to be made.
David?
So I think when I come to Public Works, some of the similar themes come up, but I think going off of even Jeff's original kind of question you posed, to me, I think general fund items and equipment replacement fund items are ones that I feel more hesitant on and I rather hold back on. But anything capital, we held back a lot on that. And the thing is, capital improvements are things that have immediate value to the residents. And I feel like that's one where if we get really behind on that, it's gonna be harder for us to catch up. And from at least my understanding, we have a lot more flexibility with our general fund for usage. So these capital improvements that have been outlined, I'm willing to be a bit more aggressive in pursuing those, because I think we did the smart thing and the right thing for this year, but we can only hold those back so long before we dig ourselves into a hole that's going to be harder to pull out of. So I think that's one where I'm not saying let's do everything, but I think those are areas, especially capital improvement projects, where I'm personally more interested in moving forward, so that way we can go through the bidding process and get those things off the ground.
Yeah, I would say you get more for your bang on today's dollars than you will on today's dollars tomorrow. So, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm saying the same thing as you, David. I'm just saying to make sure that we, obviously if we could do everything, it'd be great, right? It's just one of those things to say, hey, what if we could prioritize this list of general capital improvements on slide or page 90 to, let's say 93,
Right.
just so we know, like, hey, how what are we thinking of? Like, what's the key number one things that we want to do, and just prioritize them. That way we could say, okay, yeah, if we can't do, let's say, ash tree treatments this time around, then we kind of know, hey, we just walk away from that potentially for forever now, because we're really into reforestation now. Or if we need to push the streetlight replacement, whatever it is, that's all I'm looking for. To your point, yeah, we definitely want to try to, keep the pedal on the metal, if you will, to do as much of this as possible. Obviously, pavement patching, pavement preservation, that kind of thing is very important. It has that immediate impact to the residents, and also, lessens the potential bigger bill later on. So it definitely makes sense to do as much as possible.
Bruce is
Yeah,
one.
yeah, Andy. So I guess I think we're all saying the same thing. We're all in the same alignment. Then Jeff, what we really need to have also is a column of the drop dead date, right?
Yep.
So, because you can't bid things out and then expect it to turn around if we wait to mid-year and we miss that window. So some of these just aren't going to be able to wait that long. We're going to have to make those decisions faster. And it's a risk. I get it. it's a risk. We don't know what's gonna happen. It was a weird year this year. Guaranteed it's gonna be a weird year next year. So we're just gonna have to, some cases, just take that risk and know that it's the right thing to do for the long term.
We can do that.
So then that list will have to be made by priority for the list and availability dates is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think, Andy, as a staff, we would bring that back to our next meeting because obviously we have to adopt the budget at our first meeting in December. So
Yeah.
we will be prepared as a staff to present that at the next meeting on November 23rd.
Just wanted to,
Yes, Wayne.
my wife was telling me how the teachers do it too. It's similar to what everybody's been saying. Every department head submits their budget with A, B, and C priorities. And that helps to make a decision for the board on what they should prioritize and what they should let go.
Anything else under?
Can I
public-
just want to make one comment. It's not something that we're thinking of letting go. We may be deferring.
Deferring it. Yeah,
Okay.
wrong words.
Okay. Because I don't want folks looking for ways to have to cut. We've already went through that process once.
For sure, we're gonna defer like I think we always do in June. We look at our year halfway and see how we're doing, and maybe we'll be doing real well, and there'll be a vaccine, and everybody will be back at White Sox Park.
Adding clarity with the words. Thank you.
It'll be the same number as pre-pandemic, Wayne.
Thanks a lot, Lee.
Okay, Cubs, here we go. Anybody else under public works? Okay, let's move on to the Board of Fire and Police Commission. Jeff, if you.
Yeah, really, Andy, that's just one thing. The large line item in that is for testing. We have sergeant promotional testing, and we have 2 entry-level testing planned for both police and fire. So that's really the only variance in that budget.
Okay, and we need to get those in line to get officers in place.
Yep.
And elected officials. Jason. Anything?
I don't think there's anything remarkable there. If we sometimes
Thanks,
budget,
Jason.
well, sorry. I retract that statement. I would say contained full of remarkable individuals. There could be a couple extra dollars budgeted just because of the election. So new items, should there be new? Yes. Sorry.
Can you go to the page though, Jason? Can you just drop down to the? Thanks. All right. Thank you.
All right. Anybody got any questions for Jason on that? Okay, let's move on then to capital improvement plan. Karen and Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been talking about this all night.
Yeah, we have.
We've reintroduced things that we didn't do. I'm sorry, I don't want to steal Karen's thunder here, but I think the most important thing is here from our pre-meetings with trustees is that the state of Illinois, despite what they said, they passed a capital program in 2019, which pushed more money out into municipalities to do street improvements. And to David's point and all of your points, what that has allowed us to do is reallocate our funding more appropriately in our capital projects fund. So we're able to focus MFT money and the Rebuild Illinois plan money as part of that capital project bill to do more streets on an annual basis. And then accordingly allows us to keep our more general capital project funding for our municipal buildings, our sidewalk programs, our stormwater. So I think, you know, it's very important that we do these programs, not even for the things you mentioned, but we are sitting in a better position now per our strategic plan too, to make sure we have enough funding for our 5-year plan to do these programs, to do them appropriately with the appropriate funding. So the programs are all outlined there. I think Karen will come back with a kind of that priority of bidding and timing for the board to reconsider this at our November 23rd meeting. Karen, did I miss anything?
Yep, you got everything covered. Great, thanks.
Okay. Anybody got any questions?
Yes,
Well,
Andy.
Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
So Karen, on this, with the situation that we're at, are you seeing that contracts and contractors are adjusting the price a little more favorable to try and get some business, keep things going? You know, it's obviously a slightly different than some of our restaurants and other businesses, but I was just curious what you've been seeing.
I think we've been seeing a little bit of both. In some areas, we've actually been seeing a lot of increases because a lot of vendors are just swamped, either with their staffing issues or just the volume of work. Ironically, during the pandemic, it's amazing. I mean, we've seen it in the permit side, just how many people are doing work. So we've seen a little bit of both, Bruce. It's hard to say because we haven't bid our big projects yet. We'll see how those come in after the year, but a lot of the smaller stuff that we're doing has been increased in cost.
Okay, so to lead the witness a little longer, until I drop the, do you see it in a particular industry or a particular area that those increases may be?
A lot of our building maintenance stuff has been, I think, up a little bit. Has been challenging to get pricing for because vendors are busy. We haven't obviously did any street programs, so I couldn't tell you where things are with that. Most municipalities, they're far past that time of year for that, so I haven't heard anything from that industry yet.
Okay, so thank you, because now as I can continue where I wanted to take this, is that Jeff, you know, these are situations also when you put that list together, we have to take into consideration, because if I want to wait for something 3 months later, I may end up getting bit by a much larger price due to the fact that we waited and the like. So Karen, because of your situation with the bids and the contracts, we also need to look at, you know, what industries we may lose dollars as a result of waiting because of the sheer volume that they're going to do, and then they're just going to ramp up the price. You want this job? You want me to do it? You got to pay my price. I want to try and avoid that. So please take that into consideration when looking at this prioritization list.
And certainly from a construction standpoint, it's the timing of the season too. So the early we bid construction projects that are seasonal, the better prices we get, to your point, Bruce, is because they're looking to set their season.
Right.
Material costs are up right now too, so that's going to put a big equation into it. So manufacturers are just not producing like they were because of their staffing problems too. Wayne?
Just a quick question, Karen. Can you get a contract signed for work to be done in the spring by signing it in November and getting it for today's dollars? Is that how it works?
You'd have to we have to bid it according to our purchasing policy. So many of them are public bid. We can bid them now for sure if we are ready to go on something, and they can start their schedule now for the following year. Obviously, the earlier we bid it is always the best scenario.
Can you ask for a request for quote for a delivery date, not just the price?
Well, most of the work we have proposed is for actual construction, so they can define if they want to give us a better price being early in the season, they can start doing that.
Okay, I didn't hear all of that, but well, we
Karen,
can.
you're kind of breaking
You
up.
broke up a little bit, Karen.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
I was just saying that, you know, it all comes down to bidding. If the earlier we bid it, define what their prices are for the following season, they're going to, if they're under a union contract, they're going to know what their union contract increases are. So we can certainly bid things early if they're approved for pricing for next year. It's always best to do it the earlier you can, the better.
Does that satisfy you, Wayne?
I don't still understand it, but that's okay. I just like, let's say we're gonna do this thermal, whatever that's, striping, and let's say we don't want it done until August. Can we get the bids in on January and sign a contract at the end of January for something to be done in August?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Karen. Capital let's see, we got the capital improvement then, and general capital project fund. Same thing, Jeff, really.
Yeah, really, it's more the general capital projects, the MFT and the Rebuild Illinois are what we just spoke about. The programs are all listed in there, reallocation of certain funding. And as Tom could say, he can point out the additional revenue there, Tom, if you just want to highlight that.
Sure. So on pages 126 through 128, that's the General Capital Projects Fund. I added that this year, not the fund itself, but I added those pages to show you a 5-year plan just for that fund alone. That CIP that we just went over a few pages ago is a conglomeration of several funds. And now for the first time, I can present in this budget to you a 5-year plan, which to everybody's point, shows, our revenues coming in and the projects or programs that we have planned out. So Trustee Trejo mentioned the reforestation, the trees, the 30,000, which was from the tree survey and the plan that the board adopted to spend 30 grand every year on tree replacements. And we've plugged that in according to that plan. And, with revenues coming in as expected, which we normally, as a couple of trustees have noted, that, we generally are lower on our revenues than we actually receive. We've plugged in all of the projects that have been approved and discussed, and understand too that there are many that didn't make the cut. When they went when they were presented by the departments and then got plugged into the budget, there are some that just didn't make it either. So we do some planning, and so this fund itself, there's no real changes to the revenues. The one big difference is the transfer for debt service will decrease starting in fiscal year 22. So that really helps the situation a lot. You'll see that transfer on page 127 goes from 601,000 down to 190,000 in 22. So that's funding, as Jason's circling there, that's funding that is now available for building improvements, the trees. As you see, the street improvements we've moved out, and I'll talk about those in a second. The streetlight program, the sidewalk replacement program, parking lot improvements, and our stormwater, which we have tagged an increase in just because of the sheer volume of requests for stormwater projects. On pages 129 to 131 is MFT. And as you know, last year, the motor fuel tax was raised. And that increase, part of it went to the state, but also a nice part of that came to the village. And it is indexed for inflation as well. So we'll see an increase each year in MFT funding. And again, what that has allowed us to do when we've moved things around a little bit, on page 131, is a 5-year plan just for this fund alone. MFT funds can only be used for certain purposes, and that's street resurfacing or for certain items in the general fund. So we transfer $300,000 for road salt, street improvements, some contractual items that we pay for in the general fund. That money gets transferred over to the general fund. In 21, we've added, we have our street improvement project. We have the pavement preservation, street patching, and then we also included $200,000 in Main Street widening. And as you see in the later years, our street improvement program actually starts to increase again. And that's because the revenues are there and that we hope to index that along with our increase in motor fuel tax, we can add some more dollars to our street improvement. And at the very bottom of that chart on 131, you can see our fund balance still is healthy. Even as we spend money in 21, we're spending $315,000 more than we have coming in revenues, but that's because we have reserves And that's what those reserves are for. We collect those and then spend those in later years. And that's what we are doing, spending down those reserves to a balance that we can live with and then move forward. Pages 132 to 134 is the new fund. This is the Rebuild Illinois Fund. Along with the motor fuel tax, the state issued bonds. And the Village of Roselle received an allocation of $1.5 million that we'll receive over 3 years. So this year we received a little over 500,000. We'll get the same exact amount in 21 and then the same amount in 22. And so if you look on page 134, I've outlined those revenues. And so far, when this budget was done, we didn't know that we could use these funds for resurfacing in some cases. And because prior to this, there was some confusion by the state as to whether we could. So we will be plugging in additional street resurfacing in this fund for the later years. But the one thing that isn't here is the 120,000 for engineering for the Rodenberg Road project. Some other items in 22 for the including land acquisition for Rodenberg, and then 23 is the reconstruction. And you see the SDP revenue. That is the grant revenue that we'll be getting from DuPage mayors and managers, our federal share for this project. We have to record this on our books. So even though we don't get it in real dollars, we do still have to show this as grant revenue. So we have, 1.2 million in grant revenue over 2 years. And so that's, what the state did and how we've been able to reallocate our capital fund funding has allowed me to put these together. So you can really see rolling 5 years of what we want to do with our capital.
Comments?
I think it's really helpful. I really appreciate this view, and I think this will really help us have conversations for long-term planning.
Thank you, Thomas. Let's see, where are we at? On our insurance funds?
Jason, can you handle it?
Insurance, yes.
Insurance has the health insurance, and then the village's work comp and liability insurance. Health insurance continues to show, I believe, the benefit of being part of the IPBC consortium and able to keep our annual increases low and predictable by pooling with tens of thousands, if not maybe hundreds of thousands of lives of other municipalities throughout the region. Then the risk management component of it, we expect to see, at least the budget reflects a decrease of about $75,000 in the expected contribution for our premiums for this risk management coverage. We hope to see an even further reduction than that by the utilization of revenues that are expected to be returned to the members of IRMA. They have about $20 million that they could potentially release back to the membership. So that number is typically determined later in this year. And then the village is presented with that opportunity early next year to apply any of those returns towards our premium, which we've historically done on an annual basis.
Questions for Jason? Anybody? Okay. Information Technology Fund, Tom and Jason.
Is Tom back?
Yeah.
So the IT fund is an internal service fund that the village has now had on the books. Maybe this is the 4th year, if I'm not mistaken, Tom, 4th or 5th year. So that all of our costs internally incurred IT are allocated back or charged back to each of the operating budgets. So you'll see the revenues coming in from the departments as well as the charges going out to them. This year being 2021, overall, we expect to have a slight decrease in our total IT spend primarily the result of some projects, capital projects that you could see that occurred in 2020, about $90,000. That's now decreased to just our annual allotment that we budget for PC replacement. Other than that, it's really the continual operation of our IT, apart from about $25,000 for a one-time cost for some Microsoft software in next year. That's about the only thing that kind of stands out. Otherwise, there are ongoing annual maintenance costs to maintain the IT network.
Any questions? Okay, moving right along to the Water Sewer Operation Fund.
I think Karen could handle these next 4 funds and maybe provide a little bit of an overview, Karen. 145 through 164.
Yes, if I unmute myself, I certainly can. So our water sewer capital, water sewer operating fund, many of the projects that are in here have been ongoing throughout the wastewater treatment plant and have been introduced as part of the water sewer facility plans that we've done. We have the ongoing construction of the Devlin wastewater treatment plant construction, which will be wrapped up and completed in 2021, and the oxidation ditch project as well. Many of the other projects and stuff that you see in here are related to the operational needs at both of our facilities. And then also within the collection system, we do have a couple regulatory requirements that are coming this year on the water side. One being the risk and resiliency assessment program, which is an EPA funded or EPA mandated assessment that we do to make sure that we have no risks in our system that would create any issues to or compromise to our water system. Other than that, everything should be laid out there in terms of the projects and capital projects, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on that.
I heard the magic word. The Devlin plant project, some of the Devlin plant projects are coming to an end.
The large one, the $10 million one. And yeah, it's been going very well, and it's supposed to be wrapped up hopefully the summer of next year.
And when will that be forecasted to be paid for?
20 years.
Okie dokie then. Anybody have any questions? All right. How about the water sewer operating fund, Karen? We got that. Where am I at here?
Page 145 through 187 or 184, Andy. Which is kind of those 4 commingled funds, water sewer operating capital.
So my guess is we're on parking lot.
I'm going there, yes. Jason.
Well, given the ongoing pandemic, this fund does not look particularly healthy. Fortunately, we've had some pretty good fund balances over the years, but you can see down here the decrease, I believe that is in the fund balance over time. Or I'm sorry, that's the anticipated decrease in revenue coming in. So as you can anticipate, we're showing, Tom helped develop the fees here, the projections for next year, but it's not looking good. It's kind of in line with, I believe, what Metra is anticipating is maybe, ridership starting to return in the springtime and gradually going from the 10% it is now, maybe to 40 or 50% by the end of next year. That's certainly up in the air. We have a lot of fixed costs relative to salaries for enforcement and some other costs for operating the station, as well as repairing the surface lots. We're going to do our plan starting here later this month, closing the north side lots in order to hopefully reduce this cost here for snow removal. So that's an attempt to try to mitigate some of the decrease in revenue in this fund. Also, we'll be looking to deploy that license plate reading technology for next year for some of the projects that the board approved this year. And this is, I'm sorry, where my opening comments were the fund balance, as you can see here, this year we're looking to fall about $100,000 short and 100 and more than that next year, relative to the decrease in revenues more than anything, certainly not that much of an increase in expenditures historically. Other than that, the next one is the capital side of it. I think we're going to be holding off on deciding what exactly capital-wise we would be doing up there. This does show, I believe this is the 50%. The other half of anticipated, I think it's Maple Lot, maybe improvements. I think as Metro 19 goes on and we get a little more clarity, I think around ridership, usership up there and who owns what and who's responsible for maintaining what. We'll probably certainly put on hold capital projects right now until some, like I said, that project comes to fruition or not.
Lee?
Couple questions. So on the fees on 186. So I thought we were going to do parking permits like quarterly, but it doesn't look like there's that much revenue. And I know you're saying it might not start till spring, but then it looks like there's like a big uptick in daily lot fees. So I'm just a little, can you give me more clarity on that?
Yeah, I think, Tom, chime in when you can. Parking permits, I think we're looking at about 10 of them, 10 to 15 quarterly kind of on the books now. And maybe this is just projecting out that.
Yeah, but we're getting rid of the annual one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, we just have really no ridership.
No, right. I get that. But I'm just saying, like, I guess then to the point, like, then why do we think there's going to be 144,000 of daily lot fees versus it going to quarterly? Or are we just kind of saying we don't really know, so we're just plugging it in? Because to me, I mean, as a commuter, if I go back in, mid-year, I'm going to get the quarterly permit and not do the daily fees. So,
yeah, my guess is that daily fee is a little high. And now that you're asking us to look at it.
I took it from what we were averaging for quarterlies and leaving it at that. No, we've had several discussions, right? Are people going to buy quarterlies or are they going to go just daily? If they're going to go 2 days a week, town, they're not going to buy a quarterly. So, this is a gamble, right? Of trying to come up with what's going to be the mixture, and knowing that right now we're converting spaces to daily mainly. I plugged in, tried to come up with a percentage by month based on what we're seeing right now. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do have a number of about how much we're collecting in daily fees the last several months. Well, actually every month, but I just took the last since the pandemic started, just trying to see, okay, what are our average daily fees per month? And what if ridership starts climbing? So in the spring, I have it still very low, thinking people aren't going to go back downtown maybe till April, May, where it's going to start increasing each month. And so I just plugged in based on what our average monthly right now is, meaning daily fees, how much we're collecting daily, and then how many quarterlies we're selling. That's how I came up with the numbers.
Yeah, I guess though that I don't know that you can necessarily use that run rate for quarterlies now because there's the annual option out there. So
But we're not going to do the annuals anymore. It's just going to be quarterlies.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So you're using the run rate for existing quarterlies, even though we're getting rid of annual passes. So to me, I mean, to your point, it's a stab in the dark. I just wanted to kind of. I'm not necessarily tracking that I believe that it's going to shift that much. So I don't know. I mean, I would say rethink that a little bit. And then the other question I have is I noticed that the train station vendors is 0. Is that confirmed or is that just, we're just assuming it's going to be 0 because pretty much half the year is gone potentially?
Yeah, I mean, I've had no further conversations with the vendor at all. I think every month that goes by is that much less likely that anyone's going to return there, and let alone then what the board's decision is relative to charging rent or not.
Yeah, totally
the
tracking. I mean,
vendor.
it's reasonable
So,
to put 0. I just wanted to see if it
Yeah.
was like, hey, I'm definitely not interested, or, we're just going to
Yeah.
say 0 because it's the prudent thing to do at this point for budgeting.
Yeah, we're going
There's
on
just
almost
upside there.
a year of it being vacant. Early
Right.
next year.
If we're projecting ridership not going to 100%, then, would it be worthwhile for a business person to open, the.
Yeah, I'm totally tracking. I'm putting 0.
Yeah, got
I
it.
just wasn't sure if, like I said, if it was 100% confirmed, like, hey, I have no interest in coming back no matter what, or if it's just like, hey, we're going to just have 0 in here because that's what we're kind of assuming. If you come back mid-year, then boom, we have $2,500 or whatever. It's fine.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, I don't disagree with Lee. I think it might be a little bit off, but from an operational standpoint, whether we get the money from quarterly or from daily, it's all going to the same fund source, right? And I think the bottom line is, do we feel comfortable with the ballpark of where they're coming in at? And I would say yes. Like, I feel directionally we're right. How much you want to play with where the money goes in which bucket? Yeah, it helps a little bit, but I don't know if it's going to be earth shattering at the end of the day.
Okay. Want to move on then to TIF District 2, Roselle.
Andy, if I can take these next 5 funds, if that's all right, which is page 190 through 199, that's our 3 TIF districts and our 2 business districts. I think while most of our focus this year has been on TIF District 4, which is a new fund, East Irving Park Road development with the 72 unit complex and the proposed Metro 19, that's been our focus. But clearly, when you look at TIF District 2 and TIF District 3, increment is building and also fund balance is building. And I think with the board's recent approval of a consulting agreement with Steve Jones, and we've already met with him, Jason and his staff has met with Steve. I think coming back to the board earlier next year with some priorities for those 2 particular TIF districts will be important. Because I think when you look at the fund balance in there, you look at the increment that's being generated in both TIF 2 and TIF 3, there's some really good opportunities for the board, albeit a pandemic, to look at some opportunities there to grow. So I think those, I just wanted to make sure we pointed that out to you.
Any comments? Nope. Okay. But let's move on to 200-208, the equipment replacement fund.
I think that's part of that flex discussion that we talked about earlier coming back, Andy, with those vehicles that are in there and prioritizing for board consideration.
Sidewalk fund?
That's Tom.
I
You
don't
take it.
So the sidewalk fund is, there's still a few, the pre-annexation agreements that are paying into the sidewalk fund. Some of them have not signed, or, they just want to pay for their sidewalk now. And so we get monthly revenue from them. That'll just build up. And then when the time comes, there'll be money available for their sidewalks here. I don't have the number, how many are in there. I know there's a couple. So if anybody has any questions, I can answer that.
Anybody? All right. Foreign fire insurance fund. Tom again, Jeff?
Yeah, I'll take it, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Tom.
So this is the 2% fire tax that is allocated to municipalities. It's to be used for fire department uses. There's very specific things that can be used for. They pay for such things as cable, the cable over there, and equipment, fire equipment, I believe some workout equipment over the years, just things to assist the firefighters. And Their revenue has actually been increasing, and that's it. Not much in there this year.
Questions? Firefighter pension fund.
Tom, you got the pension funds? Go ahead.
Sure. So these are all of the costs associated with the fire pension fund. If you remember from the actuarial report, you'll see on the heading there, it's as of January 1st, 2020, the fund is 62.5% funded. This, as I said, includes all costs and all revenues. There is revenues from the employee contributions, from the village contributions, which you can see on page 214, and also investment income. Investment income is hard to budget for. So I generally put in $300,000 every year. As you can see in 18, it was a negative 176 due to the state of the economy, the state of the markets, I should say, at 12/31/18, and then over $1 million in 2019. I know they're up again this year. In fact, I believe they're higher than they were at the end of 12/31/19, based on the market. And then this has all of their pension payments and any fees that they have to pay for administration of the fund.
Questions? Wayne?
Could you remind me again, or the rest of the board, what percentage of the pension fund has to be funded? And what year does it have to be 100%? Or is that, I've lost track of what the requirements are.
Okay, so by state statute, currently, as we speak today, it is the year 2040 and 90% funded. The village does not accept that 90% funding number. We have our calculations done at 100% funding by 2040.
So as we move forward, what numbers are we supposed to be getting every year? If, we can afford it.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's 62.5. Where do we need to be in 2021? Where do we need to be in 2022? Not the whole gamut, but are we on pace to keep up with what we're supposed to be doing?
Yes, because we fund 100% of what the actuarial tells us, what the actuarial report tells us. So based on that, we are funding adequately to get us to the 100% funding by 2040. So that's, the calculation is by 2040, you have to be at 100%. We're on pace for that.
So where do we have to be in 2021?
That is not, there's no formula for that. It's just, they just say at 2040. And because of the way the market is, you can't say that, next year we have to be at 75%. We just tried to get it to that magic number. They do all their calculations based on that number at 2040.
And do we stack up well compared to other communities? Probably we do, right?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Because there are many that are under 50% funding.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a quick comment.
Sure, please go ahead.
Question, maybe to help clarify the last question from Wayne. Wayne, are you asking why we're putting the 559,000? Why is it that number?
No, I'm questioning what percentage we're supposed to be to make sure that we're funding the pension fund.
Right, but I think the answer, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, the answer is the actuary is telling us to put 559, 690, so we keep on pace so that in 2040 we're at that 100%. Is that right, Tom?
It is absolutely correctly. Thank you.
Okay, so then it's not so much the percentage, but I guess it is. This is what gets us those percentages. Okay.
Yep.
Right. The one thing I would say though, in the future, and even if we go back, I think what would be good maybe to see is a secondary axis on this chart that shows how much we're funding. So let's just call it, FY 14, where we at 40, and then we went up to 45, then we went up to 55, and then we went back down, then we went back up. I think that might be helpful. just to kind of see what what we've been doing in the last 5 or 6 years and how it's kind of bounced around over time. I mean, I know in here it says the latest, like as of January 1st, fund is 59.4% funded, but I think it would be good to see kind of like how we've been tracking over time.
I thought we were higher up before, percentage wise.
And
Right,
remember
you
that,
can be, but remember they change the assumptions too on us on the rate of return. They changed the assumption to use. So
so you want the funding percent?
I think it's good to see, just to kind of make sure that we all feel good about the numbers, right? Like over time, we know that there's like swings up and down, but like are we directionally going in the right direction? And I get it, the actuaries are doing their due diligence too, but I think it's just a helpful data point to see.
Absolutely.
And Lee, just for clarification, I want to make sure that employer contribution for this particular year is $757,235, not the $559.
Yeah, right.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I just saw that contribution number on the other page.
That's all, just
Yeah,
clarification.
regardless, that's the number that the actuary is telling us to keep on pace to get to the 100%.
Correct.
Anybody else? Okay. Jeff?
No, please, Tom can do the
Oh,
same thing.
please.
I'll just say ditto.
Yeah. Same here, Tom. Ditto.
Except for being, a much larger fund because of the number of employees. Same thing, revenues, our contributions and income return, and pension payments and fees.
Questions?
And can I make one other comment? So, Jason right now is circling the 30 million, the 31, almost 31 million. And when you compare that to the amount of pension payments, so the pension payments are 2.8 million. And the fund balance is almost 31. And that's a good 10 times assets. So, our assets are 10 times our pension payments. And I believe that's the same, if not better, for the firefighters pension fund. So that's always a good mark. Every actuary I've talked to has always said, if you're over 10, that's really, really good.
Comments, questions? Okay, Jeff?
Andy, can I make a recommendation on the last one? So
Please.
obviously with the board's kind of desire for staff to go back, create flex lists for our general fund, for our capital projects fund, and for our equipment replacement funds. Rather than get through this recommendation by staff and Karen for updating our public works department, do you want to evaluate that against those flex lists? Or do you want to have Karen go through that now? Which is really the last pages of the document, which is 2.8.
I think we should, from what I've heard, I don't want to speak for everybody. You want to evaluate that against that flex list, guys?
Yeah,
Maybe-
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
We will be prepared to kind of present that along with those other 3 areas we just talked about.
All right. Okay. And that's all we can go from here. Let's go back to my agenda.
Yep.
Okay. Other business for discussion. Anybody? Okay. Then I need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I'll second.
We will not be coming back to this meeting, so we will also adjourn this meeting too.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Madam Clerk, I need a roll call.
Aye. You're on mute,
Aye.
Barry.
Patty, you're on mute.
Everyone's getting hit today with the mute button.
Sorry about that. Trustee Trejo,
Aye.
trustee Domke,
Aye.
trustee Berkshire,
Yes.
trustee Sarno. Trustee Sarno?
Yes.
Yes.
He's on mute too.
Okay, and trustee Pulaski.
Aye.
And we
Um,
will-
I'm gonna need about a 5-minute break
Okay.
to start the next meeting, please.
All right.
So let's see, I've got 7:15-ish. So
Yep.
7:20. Okay.
Thank
Yep.
you.